My name is Rod, and I like to party. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 27 of Movies Are Awesome, the show all about deep sea diving. My name is Nathan Pottle, and thank you so much for joining me today. I did not get the opportunity to go see Ad Astra over the weekend or Downton Abbey, but I never watched the Downton Abbey show, so that is why I did not go watch it. I'm hearing good things, though. My wife and my sister and my mom all went to go watch it because they're big fans of the show, and they really enjoyed the movie, so I'm glad that they liked it. Maybe one day I will watch the show and then watch the movie, who knows. But because I did not go see Ad Astra, which is a big science fiction movie, I thought maybe I should talk about my favorite science fiction movies today. So I made my top 5 definitive list of science fiction films. This is just for me. For other people it might be different. All kinds of good stuff like that. I've got some honorable mentions that I'll mention as well, and why kind of they're not in my top 5, but they're still excellent films. I don't have any other kind of housekeeping things to mention, so why don't I just get right into it. My first honorable mention that I want to talk about is Jurassic Park. Now, the only reason that this movie is not in my top 5 best science fiction movies, because Jurassic Park is in my top 10 favorite movies of all time, but when I think science fiction, my mind doesn't automatically go to Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park is more almost of like a dinosaur fantasy horror type thing. Like, it is science fiction, like thinking about it objectively, but my mind doesn't automatically gravitate to a movie like Jurassic Park when I'm thinking about science fiction. So even though it has a lot of those science fiction elements, they're dealing with cloning and building DNA of dinosaurs and growing them in a lab, even though that's a very big part of the movie, it didn't quite feel as science fiction-y as some other movies for me, so that is why it's just in my honorable mentions. Another movie that I have in my honorable mentions is The Matrix. Now, this movie came out in 1999, is directed by the Wachowskis, and this movie is kind of crazy. Introduced some interesting concepts and visual effects that I don't think really hold up today. I think a lot of The Matrix actually doesn't really hold up. It's very much of its time, that late 90s. They're all wearing leather and they've got cool glasses, and it did introduce a lot of new things into the film industry, and I am grateful for that. But it also introduced some things into the film industry that maybe aren't as good as well. And I don't want to get into the whole minutia of what The Matrix did or did not do for the film industry. I think it's a good movie. I enjoy it a lot, and that is why it is in my honorable mentions for the best science fiction movies of all time. I have one more honorable mention, and that's going to be a movie called Ex Machina. Now, I think this movie is probably the least known of all the movies I have on my list here today, so I'll just give a quick rundown of what Ex Machina is. So basically, the story is the main character, played by Donald Gleason, wins a prize at his work. And he works for this tech company, and the prize is he gets to go meet the founder of the company, who's this brilliant scientist who's played by Oscar Isaac. Now, when he gets to the remote location that he lives at, he discovers that Oscar Isaac is working on creating artificial intelligence, and he's actually there to be part of a test to determine whether the robot, who's played by Alicia Vikander, is actually artificial intelligence or not, or whether it's just really advanced programming. It's a fascinating movie, and the visual effects are really good for it, and it's so subtle in its mystery and its science fiction, and it has this kind of low-keyness to it. Like, it's not shoving the science fiction aspects in your face. They do talk about it a lot, and it's very much at the forefront of this movie, but it's more about the characters, including the robot, and how they interact, and what is it to be a human, or what does it mean to think, and things like that are brought up in this movie. I can't remember the director's name. He also did Annihilation that came out last year. I liked that movie as well, but it's not in my honorable mentions or in my top 5, so I'm not going to talk about it. All right, so those were my three honorable mentions. So, without further ado, why don't I just get into my top five science fiction films? We'll start off, as always, with number five and work our way to number one. Number five for me is also the oldest movie on the list, and that's going to be Logan's Run. It came out in 1976, and it's very interesting. So, basically, the story of this movie is you're living in this like ideal society where you can do whatever you want and have a lot of fun, and that's all fine and good up until you're 30. And in this society, you die at 30. And not because of natural causes or anything, is because you're executed. Because it's just to sustain the population. So one of the main characters, Logan, his job is to go find people who have like ran away and deserted, who were close to aging out, and then like bring them back and take them down, kind of thing. Like he's an agent, but then he falls in love and they end up like running away themselves, like realizing that their world is actually a lot more sustainable than they think it is. So they can live past 30, and it's very, very interesting look at the future, a very interesting look at the future. I haven't seen it in a very long time, but I remember really, really liking it. Now, when I watched Logan's Run, it was kind of a phase in my life where I just watched a ton of like classic films, like anything from the 70s or older. I would just watch them nonstop, like movie after movie after movie after movie, going through all these classics, just so that I can say that I have seen them. And I think I need to revisit Logan's Run just because it has been so long since I've last seen it, but because when I was sat down to think of science fiction movies, Logan's Run was one of the first to come to my mind, and so that is why it is number five on my list. All of the other movies are going to be much, much newer. The next movie, number four on my list, is actually the next oldest, and it came out in 2010, and that's going to be Inception. Now, I'm not going to spoil Inception on the off chance that in the last 10 years you have not seen it. This movie is phenomenal. Now, I describe it as phenomenal, but it's still only number four on my list. That's just because the three other movies I think are even better. So, what's unique about Inception is just how much you need to wrap your brain around this movie. Like, it took kind of concepts from The Matrix and amplified them. So basically the story of Inception, if you're not familiar, scientists have developed technology that allows you to enter someone else's dream, and inside their dream you can extract information, and it's like a whole new form of spying. You just wait till someone is asleep, get them in the same room, hook them up to the machine, hook up your spy into the machine, they go into the dream, they grab the information, and they steal it. And that's called extraction. But what Inception is going into someone's mind and planting an idea, and it's almost like mind control, of like getting them to do something that you want, as opposed to getting information that you want. So, and the whole aspect of this movie is about how Inception is impossible, but there is a way to do it, and one of the main characters has done it before, and he won't really explain how or why, but you do find out all that stuff later in the movie. And so what they end up doing is they have a dream within a dream within a dream, and they keep going layers in to this person's mind, and as you get further, it like time works differently and speeds, and there's so many things to keep track of. Like when I saw this movie in theaters in 2010, my mind was blown, and I was shook at how well thought out and planned this movie was. It also, like, it's such a unique concept that is so fully realized that you're in. Like, it's not something like silly or goofy that you need to buy into. It's just part of their world, and you're along for the ride. And everything else about this world is like pretty much the same. We just have technology to enter into someone's mind. And I think that's a really unique thing about science fiction in this case, because it's not like everything is so advanced. No, it's just this one aspect of the world. But because this one thing exists, like the way the world works and its dynamics are different. And so everything like that is thought out and everything is executed very, very well. This movie was nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. It lost to The King's Speech, which I'm okay with because The King's Speech is also a phenomenal movie, but Inception was definitely a contender. If you have not seen it, as always, and with all these other movies, check it out. Inception is awesome, and you should watch it. Now I'm gonna move on to my number 3. So, number 3 on my list is a movie that is science fiction, and it's kind of a man versus nature type story, and that is The Martian. And this came out in 2015. It's directed by Ridley Scott. I was about to say Daisy Ridley, and I was like, well, that's not right. Ridley Scott, not Daisy Ridley. And The Martian is about Matt Damon's character. What is his name? Mark Watney? Something like that. And he gets kind of left behind on a mission to Mars because this storm comes by and an accident goes wrong, and now he's on Mars by himself, and he has to figure out how to survive long enough for his crew to come back and save him. And it's like him working on Mars and like everyone on Earth working, and he has to figure out how to communicate with Earth and has to figure out how to make food and has to figure out like all of these different things. And it's just about like human ingenuity in such a hostile environment. Now, I absolutely love this movie, and I've also read the book, and the book is also fantastic. One of the issues with the book, though, is it can sometimes get a little bogged down in all of the science and breaking down exactly how everything works, and I don't always need all of that. It's good to have, but I'm happy that it didn't all transfer over into the movie. And this, like, Matt Damon is a very, like, take it or leave it kind of actor for me. Like, sometimes he shows up in things and he's really, really great. And, like, I'm all over whatever he's doing. And the Martian is one of those. But sometimes I'll see him in a movie and I'll be like, well, like, it's Matt Damon, I guess. Like, here he is. This movie it just feels so real. And the reason that I have it over Inception is because, like, at its heart, it's a story of survival, and really, like, what does that do to a person? Like, he's alone on Mars for a very long time, and he can only talk to people through, like, at first it's just through, like, taking pictures and sending them back and forth, and then it develops to be a little bit more advanced than that. But the movie as a whole really focuses on what does this do to Mark Watney as a person, and how does it affect him, and how does he choose to overcome all of these feelings, and like how does he choose to keep having such a positive outlook on everything when everything is working against him and he's basically a dead man walking, and there's only one way to successfully get back home, and if he does one thing wrong, he's going to die. And so it's just really a fantastic movie. The visual effects also are really outstanding for The Martian. Like, when he's just like sitting outside of his little hut and he's just looking at the Martian landscape in his suit, it's just breathtaking. They captured the look of Mars really well. And I have nothing but good things to say about this movie. One of the characters on Earth is played by Jeff Daniels, and Jeff Daniels is such an underrated talent. Anytime he's in something, I want to watch it. He's really good in Looper, he's really good in Dumb and Dumber, he's really good in Pleasantville. Just anytime Jeff Daniels pops up in a movie, you should think about checking it out, just because he is such an underrated talent. I like Jeff Daniels quite a bit, and I really like The Martian. It's my third favorite science fiction film of all time. That's pretty much it about The Martian. I'm going to move on to the next movie on my list. We're down to number 2, and that's going to be Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. This one came out in 2014, is directed by Matt Reeves, and it is the second movie in the new Planet of the Apes trilogy. So there was Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and then this one, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and then War for the Planet of the Apes. Out of those three, I feel that the second one is the best, which is very interesting because a lot of people have the opinion that sequels are never as good and stuff like that, but not this movie. When I saw this movie in theaters and I came out, I had initially described it as cinematic perfection. This movie is just running on all cylinders, and everything is just on point. The performances are amazing, the story is amazing, the visual effects are groundbreaking. There's almost nothing to complain about with this movie. If you're not familiar with the Planet of the Apes movies, I'll give you a quick rundown. So basically, the story of this movie is it's been 10 years since the events of the first film, in which Caesar gains intelligence and spreads it to the other apes. And then the virus that made the apes smart is also deadly to humans and wipes out most of Earth's population. So it's been 10 years since that happened, and there's been wars and things like that, and the apes are just living in the woods, building houses, writing on walls, and teaching each other how to speak, and they're just living their life. They don't want to be bothered. They're going out hunting, things like that. Caesar is the leader. And then they run into some humans. And their interactions with the humans, there's just such a great tension to this movie. The balance is so delicate, and at any moment it's going to tip and a war is going to start, but you don't know when or how, or who wants there to be a war and who doesn't. It's just so well executed that I'm just on the edge of my seat the entire time. And the visual effects of this movie came out 5 years ago. It still absolutely holds up 100%. I rewatched it just last week, so I can say for sure those apes still look pretty real. I like this movie a whole lot, and Caesar is such a good character. Now, he is kind of like the supreme leader of the apes. He's in charge, and anything that he decides is what everybody does, right? But some apes are maybe thinking they should do things that Caesar doesn't want to do. And so then you get this dynamic of uprising against Caesar, and then Caesar has a son who's feeling a little bit rebellious, and so he's dealing with that all of a sudden, and now he's dealing with these humans, and now Caesar was raised by humans in a very healthy and nurturing environment, and one of the other apes, Koba, was imprisoned by humans in a more scientific experiment environment. So he hates humans because of that, and Caesar sees that there are good and bad sides to humans, and he's so conflicted and just trying to do the right thing for his community, for his people. I don't want to say people because they're not, but for his race. He just wants to keep all the apes safe and live good lives and not lose lives unnecessarily by going to war. And Caesar has such power and presence. There's a scene in the movie where all of the apes are just freaking out and making noise and chattering and talking amongst themselves about what they should do, how they need to handle the humans, and all Caesar does is hold up his hand and everyone stops talking. And then there's another scene where all he does is stand up and everyone stops talking. Caesar is an ape of few words, he isn't always chatting away, but when he has something to say, it's important, and everyone stops to listen to what Caesar has to say. And it's a wonderful performance by Andy Serkis. He is just such a talent. He's like Jeff Daniels, but more. If you see that Andy Serkis is going to be in a movie, go check it out. Of course, he plays Gollum in Lord of the Rings. He's Caesar in Planet of the Apes. He's King Kong in King Kong. But there are some movies where he appears without visual effects, right? Oh, he's also the Supreme Leader Snoke in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. But then he's also in Black Panther. He plays Ulysses Claw, and he's really good. So Andy Serkis is just so exceedingly talented, and this movie in particular really showcases all of his talent. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is my second favorite science fiction movie. I have one left. Isn't very old, it only came out 2 years ago, but it quickly became one of my favorite movies ever made, and it is in my top 10 favorite movies of all time, and that is 2017's Blade Runner 2049. It came out in 2017, but takes place in 2049. Now, this movie is one of the most beautiful movies I have ever watched. The cinematography was done by Roger Deakins, who's just one of the best cinematographers who ever picked up a camera, and every frame of this movie is a piece of art. It just looks beautiful from beginning to end. There is not a shot or a frame that is wasted in this movie. Everything about this world is just shown to us in such a beautiful and meaning way. And even the parts of the world that are a little like grimy and dingy, it's still shown to us in a way that's very appealing, and we don't want to look away. We want to see everything that's happening. This is quite a long movie. It's almost 3 hours long, and it's a very slow-paced film. Now, I really like movies that are kind of a slow burn and takes its time and works toward big revelation or a big ending or a very thoughtful character piece. And that's exactly what this movie is. I really, really like this movie a lot. Now, this is the sequel to the original Blade Runner, which came out in the 80s sometime. I don't remember the exact year. I didn't look it up. And this is also like Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. I feel the sequel is better than the original. I do enjoy the original Blade Runner quite a bit, but it's not even in my honorable mentions because this movie is just leaps and bounds better. I don't know what else to say. It's so... Now, this is a world where everything is advanced, as opposed to Inception, where it's just like one aspect of the world is advanced. This movie, like everything. They've got flying cars. They've got robots that look like people. They've got robots that look like animals. They have holograms. They have just like everything in your stereotypical future. They've got it. And Ryan Gosling is quickly becoming one of my favorite actors. Like anytime he pops up in a movie, I'm giving it careful consideration and like probably almost definitely going to watch it. Like in First Man, he was amazing. In Blade Runner 2049, he's amazing. In La La Land, he's amazing. He just keeps cranking out excellent performances. Also, The Nice Guys, which is a comedy, but he's still really good in it. He plays his part really well. And Blade Runner 2049, so if you're not familiar with this world and the stories that takes place within it, basically humanity has created replicants, and what replicants are synthetic humans, basically. Like they're robots who are designed to only live for a certain amount of time, and they like work off planet basically as like miners and things like that. But sometimes they come back and they like wreak havoc on the world because they're jealous of humanity or whatever, and so the people who hunt them down are called Blade Runners. And our main character, who's played by Ryan Gosling, is one of these Blade Runners, and he is working to solve a mystery. This is kind of like a detective film noir type story almost, and so he's putting the pieces together, trying to figure out what's going on. I don't want to give anything away about this movie other than that's like the basic plot, and I don't want to give any more away so that you can go watch it and experience it for yourself. But I will say it is a slower pace and it is pretty long. So if that's not your thing, probably stay away from it. I will also say, if you watch the original Blade Runner and then watch 2049, you will understand more of what's going on, but at the same time, it's not necessary. Anything that you absolutely need to know is in this movie. But from watching the original, you're just going to get like added bonuses of like, oh, I recognize that thing, or oh, that's an extra like piece to put together. But You can watch this movie completely by itself without any knowledge of the Blade Runner universe, and you will understand from beginning to end what the story is and what's happening. There are callbacks and things like that, but like I said, you don't need it. This movie is also filled with stunning visual effects and stunning performances. And Harrison Ford is in this movie as well. If you're not familiar, he's the original Blade Runner, and then he comes back into this movie as well. And he's really great. Like, Harrison Ford cares about this character, and he really showed up. And I appreciate that he did that, because it's a wonderful story where he gets involved. It's a wonderful movie. It's absolutely beautiful, and the science fiction is completely on point. So I'm saying that Blade Runner 2049 is the best science fiction movie of all time. And it's definitive until a better movie comes out. That's the one I'm sticking with. So that's all I've got. That's the whole thing. That's all I wanted to talk about today. If you have a favorite science fiction movie, why don't you let me know about it? Or if there's something on my list that you don't quite agree with, or if you feel Interstellar should be in there, which it shouldn't, because Interstellar is a bad movie full of plot holes and it's not good, and I don't like it. But if you feel otherwise, why don't you reach out to me on social media? You can find me on Twitter at PoddleNathan and on Instagram at PoddleProductions. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I really enjoy making these episodes, and it warms my heart to know that there are people out there who actually take the time to listen. So once again, thank you so much, and if you have nothing else to do, go watch more movies.